All right, good morning, everybody. You can see why we have Angie kick things off, right? Her energy and passion is just contagious. So she does a fantastic job, as the rest of the committee does, with putting this program together. I could not be more thrilled to be looking out at this fantastic group. To see this organization grow and change just in a very short period of time is so exciting for me personally, and I am very, very excited to have you all here and hope that you really, really enjoy your day. So on that, I get to share and introduce our first two keynote speakers. And what's really exciting to me about introducing these ladies is one in particular is one of these women that has been one of my friends and my colleagues and my support system for the last 20 plus years. So, and one of our CIO members here today is also one of those same women. So there is so much power in that making connections that Angie spoke about and connecting with others and staying connected with others through the years that are so important. So with that, I'm gonna start the introductions as they're getting ready to go with their presentation. So Marcie Merriman is the woman that I spoke about that I've known for such a long time, and I'm thrilled to have her with us today. She is a successful entrepreneur, former retail executive and creative agency partner, an internationally recognized leader in cultural anthropology and brand strategy. Marcie has spent 25 years working with boards, CEOs, and their teams to propel growth through human-centric strategies and design. Within E&Y, Marcie is a digital strategy leader. Our second keynote speaker with Marcie today is Julianne Wu, and she is a principal at E&Y's advisory strategy practice based in Boston. So she's one of our travelers in today, thank you. With more than 20 years experience in strategy transformation, digital and customer experience, Julianne has worked with clients to develop and execute growth strategies across a variety of industries, including telecommunications, media, entertainment, healthcare, financial services, and utilities. Her primary focus on digital strategy and customer experience is what we're excited to hear all about today. So with that, give a big welcome for two E&Y ladies, Marcie and Julianne.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much for having us. Apologies, let me get this all situated. Can you guys hear us okay? All right, well, it was such a great opening. I mean, I hope you guys feel as inspired as I feel and Marcie feels. We sat there going, wow, we know why Angela gets the opening remarks. She is full of energy, and we want her passion and her spirit driving us throughout the day. So I think that's great. So Marcie and I want to spend the next 45 minutes, hour with you and share with you a point of view about women in technology and how that's evolving and how all of you should be thinking about it as you go through your journey in technology. So hopefully we'll give you some interesting things to ponder and make it relevant for each of you. And at the end, we'll take questions. If you guys have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah, and one of the important things that we're going to cover in this too is the next generations. Because when we look out, when Julianne and I look out, and see where we've been and what we've followed and what's come up behind, we see even bigger opportunities in what's coming up behind us. So we want to think about who they are, what's driving them, and what we can do to both support them, but to leverage them. Because the fact is, they're bringing a lot of power, and they're going to bring a tidal wave of energy, potential, ambition, and no limits thinking. So how do we think about using them to further the cause of all of us? So we'll incorporate that into this too.
Yeah, I should also mention that both of us have 15?
Mine's 14.
14. I have a 15-year-old daughter. And so both of us have daughters. And so many of this comes backed by Marcie's research, as well as our personal experiences when we think about the younger generation that we interact with. All right, so we're going to get into it. Okay. Okay, so, okay. Don't come closer. I cannot move. I'll go this way. Shuffle. Can you guys hear? Okay. Sorry about that. That's now, if you weren't awake, you are now, right? Okay. So we all know that women are highly underrepresented in the technology areas, right? So Angie gave you guys the stats here in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus is no different than even in Boston, Massachusetts. It's the same thing. Women are generally underrepresented in technology. So we just wanted to refresh our stats and take a look at it again. So we said, okay, just how underrepresented are we? If you look at women in the workforce, professional occupation workforce, we represent about half of all workers out there. But then when you look specifically in the fields that are relevant to computers and math and engineering, you only have about 25%. Again, not that different than the stats that you see here in Columbus, Ohio. So you hear a lot, and you hear a lot about the initiatives that are underway to bring women through the education system, to encourage them to take on more interest in STEM areas, right? So we looked at some of those stats, and we said, okay, of those women that graduate, or those people that graduate with bachelor's degrees, how many are women? And lo and behold, there's actually more women graduating with bachelor's degrees than men right now. But again, if you look at those that earn bachelor's degrees in STEM, in any kind of science, technology, engineering, mathematics kind of area, again, it's less than 25%. So what's going on, right? We're all highly educated. Why is there not this interest in tidal wave of women going in to STEM fields? So then if you look again and you look at it by levels, right, as the career progresses in one's career, you know, maybe they just didn't want to get a STEM education, maybe they wanted art history or whatever it may be, but you know, they enter into the workforce. So the interesting thing here is, again, right, workforce-wise, we're about 50%, let's call it close enough. But they're not taking on entry-level tech jobs. And of course, as you'd imagine, right, it becomes worse the higher the level you go. Many might argue, or some counter opponents might argue and say, well, that's because you women, you opt out, you choose to take on different roles or to leave the higher echelons of management. I'm not so sure that's really what's happening, right? So we would venture, you know, when Marcie and I were pondering over this and thinking about why is this the case, there's a lot of value about women in technology, and there's a lot of flexibility that comes about with women in technology. So why aren't we embracing technology to do the things that we want to do?
Well, the other thing is they're staying in the workforce.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're opting out to stay at home. We have more women working than ever before. We have the dual income families, which is needed more than ever before. We have single families. So they're not leaving to opt out of the workforce. They're leaving to opt out of the big companies. They no longer want to take part of it. So we're seeing less and less women move up into these upper echelons of the larger companies.
All right, much quicker. All right, and so again, just more stats around this in terms of leadership roles, right? So even we even broadened our perspective a little bit and said, okay, let's look at roles. Maybe they're not CIOs, but let's look at roles where they actually are in leadership positions and they can influence the amount of women in these types of roles, or they can influence a company's product development path or strategy. Again, stats aren't great.
But we're making gains. So there's women in the workforce, and women in technology is growing at 238% faster than what we're seeing with men. We have more female CIOs than ever before, and it has grown significantly. And since 2009, the percentage of female-led startups has doubled. So we're making gains there. But if you look at the big picture, my big picture doesn't work.
Oh, no.
If you look at that big picture, it's going to take, according to the World Economic Forum, it's going to take 170 years at best. This is the best case scenario for the gender pay gap to close. This is across the 107 countries that are recorded in this. But even worse.
Come on.
Technology hates me today.
Try yours. Oh, okay. We got to get closer.
Oh, is that it? There.
Okay.
So you might think with that, the 170 years, yeah, it's 107 countries, so it must be these other countries that are holding us back. Fact is, North America is the only one going backward. So last year, in 2016, the gender pay gap actually went back to where it was in 2008. So if we look at all the things that have been happening in the last few years, all the talk of equality and pay parity, and I know our own firm, at EY, we're doing a lot of work about women fast forward, yet we're going backward. Something is not working. And if we look at some of the aspects around it.
Oh, yours is dead.
It's not education. You might think that that's the top issue, the top challenge. According to the World Economic Forum, in 10 years, the education gap will close. That'll be done. So we're better educated than ever before. We have more women in the workforce than ever before. We have more women in leadership than ever before. And yet, in the US and in North America, we're going backward in equality. And if you look at this, something's got to change. We're doing all these great programs, but something has got to change. It's no longer enough. We need to think bigger. We need to think differently. Bigger's good, but differently. What are the real problems? What are the real solutions? What are alternative solutions? And the things we need to think about, not just talk about, but think about and do and act on.
All right, so we want to offer you a different lens from which to look at the problem, right? We just shared with you a bunch of stats. Marcie brought up some good stats. We looked at it all different ways. Being sort of the analytical side of us, we were hungry for data and we wanted to see exactly what is going on and are we solving or are we even asking the right questions? So we took a step back and we said, what's going on in the environment around us? And this thing called the digital revolution or digital convergence, again, you guys have seen it, you've been living it. Those in technology already know about it. They're like, yeah, whatever. But what is really happening, right? It started off as a medium or channel. You guys know the rise of eBay and all that other stuff, and at one point I talked about, how long have I been in commerce? And if you really bring it together, and you might go all the way back into the late 80s, early 90s when you think about electronic commerce and some of the things that we were doing around there. That could have been digital, right? It's been around for a while. But what really has happened? There's this convergence, right, that's going on. And it's really fundamentally changing the way business operates. So what specifically? Think about the global reach and think about your ability to really scale. Businesses here in Columbus, Ohio don't have to just sell to people here in Columbus, Ohio, right? Their reach is far greater. The second thing I would offer up is the velocity and pace of change is going at such astronomical rates right now. Our computing power, our ability to analyze data, our ability to really understand and develop insights from what's going on has really fundamentally changed. And it's forced us in the business world to actually move faster, make decisions faster, figure it out and go, right? The whole notion of agility when you do agile software development is test and learn, keep going, right? Now, business as a whole is taking that. In fact, I can't even stand how they bastardize the word agility or agile sprints, right? They apply to everything. But basically, this whole notion is to say, right, you're moving at a much faster pace. So the use of technology and all that coming together in the environment which we're in right now is fundamentally changing how all of us operate.
So in this environment, and as things change, there's going to be winners and losers. And right now, what we see is the bigger companies are becoming the bigger losers, or losing faster maybe. So social, economic, political changes, new technologies, new competitors are constantly disrupting the status quo. So the startups are hotter than ever, and they can grow faster than ever. But the big companies, they got to be watching out. And they're not keeping up. These are the ones falling off the radar. It's predicted by 2025, half of the S&P companies will no longer be on the S&P. But even bigger than that, there's many that predict that half of the Fortune 500s will not exist in 10 years. I mean, think about that. That is radical change. And it's the smaller companies that are coming in and they're eating these guys up. And the reason they're able to do that is because the drivers of success have changed. If we look at what it took in the past, within fashion and retail, apparel brands, a lot of the areas I do work, it used to be the intuitiveness of the merchant. You had this godlike person who was the merchant that could just figure out what the next fashion trend was going to be, what women should want, what men should want. And they told them, this is what's hot and what you need to buy. And then you had everybody going out and buying that. All the kids were wearing the same Abercrombie shirt. Everybody looked exactly the same. Things have shifted. They now have choices. And the consumer is now in control. It's no longer the brands, whether it's a consumer brand, a fashion brand, healthcare, whatever, telling them what they should do. It's the consumer now telling the companies what they want, or just going out and doing it. And the companies need to figure it out. They need to have the understanding of who these people are, what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and anticipate all their needs and tie it all together. And that takes technology. And technology are now driving the companies. One of my favorite examples is Stitch Fix. Have any of you heard of Stitch Fix?
All right.
So yay, I love a woman crowd. The guys never know it. I mean, fantastic company. And it gets all this credit for being a great technology company. I mean, it's the hottest new retail brand. And it's a true retail brand. I mean, they have 450 brands that they sell. They're not producing any of them. It's a retailer. And we hear about the death of retail, and here's one that's absolutely killing it. They're not out of LA. They're not out of New York. They're out of Silicon Valley. And they don't have 50 merchants pulling it all together. They have 75 data scientists pulling it together. So it is a technology company that's driving the change. But if you look at the front end, the consumer end, you don't even see the technology. I mean, you sign up for it, and basically it's done. It's the least technology-focused purchase you can make. You're not going on to purchase it off the website. It comes to you. It knows you. It understands you. It anticipates what you'll want next. And this is how. It's the technology behind it. The bigger companies are not able to catch on to this in the same way. They're trying to turn a Titanic, figure out exactly what they need, test it, prove it out. By the time they do all that, it's no longer relevant. And that's how all of these others are pushing ahead.
All right, so Marcie just gave the examples of non-traditional tech companies, right, actually being built, or the foundation of it is technology and data, right? I would offer up that companies that are in the tech industry or even in traditional siloed sectors also are trying to break free. And you're starting to see this new markets, adjacent markets happening. And so you'll see a quote here by one of our executive VPs. I don't know these titles. Basically, this whole notion, right, that new market opportunities.
Somebody really important.
Somebody important, okay? Yeah, somebody important that has not a lot of thinking about this. But this whole notion, and we as consultants, right, we operate across multiple industries oftentimes, and we usually have our specialties, but across all of them, one thing's consistently true. We are being asked by our clients, what do we do with this? How do we shift, right? Stitch Fix, the example that Marcie gave, it was built as a digital native organization. But most of the companies that many of us work in, if it's a large organizations, they're big, they're siloed. How do they move? How do they respond, right? How do they leverage the technology to actually make change happen? So some of these guys are actually starting to think about entering new markets. So let me give a few examples here. AIG offers the largest, I think they're the largest provider of insurance, workers' compensation, okay? They actually are now in the wearable device business. They saw this whole notion of having more data and being able to really anticipate workers' safeties, whether or not they're in a good environment or a bad environment, you know, what levels, how do you know if you can prevent a heart attack if they're exerting too much energy, right? How do you anticipate those things? They're capturing that through data. They bought a company that does nothing but wearable technologies to capture that data. Another example, which is near and dear to my heart if you guys are coffee drinkers. So Starbucks, in the business of coffee, right? They actually had, let's see, I'm going to get the number here right. I want to make sure I do this. They had 13 million customers in 1 year. No, in 1 week. Okay, so all right, hold on. In 1 week, they do 7 million transactions on their mobile app, okay? So think about that. All of us are buying our coffees. We click on the mobile app. 1 week, 7 million different customers. In 1 month, they take in close to $14 billion in deposits, right? So has anybody ever thought about the fact that every time you reload your card, you're actually giving them 25 bucks? If you reload your card 25 or 50 bucks, how long does it take for you to get to deplete that balance? But yet we all shimmy up and we reload our card because they incent us to. They're essentially a bank. Think about that, right? They're taking in deposits. but they don't have a banking license. So they're fundamentally shifting their business model. They're making money off of that. Don't, you know, my career started at GE Capital. I know exactly this whole 1 week's worth of money that you don't have to do anything with is money in the bank that you earn interest on, and so on and so forth, and the ripple effect. Lower cost of capital, everything. There's fundamental value in that. But to us as consumers, we sit there and say, oh, I love it. I have an app. I get free coffee the more and more I spend. And I'm willing to spend 25 bucks, 50 bucks and give it to them right off the bat, right? Apple made it easy. I push my thumbprint on it. Ding, it goes. In fact, watch out for your kids. My kids actually said, hey, can I load the Starbucks app on? Can I load your app? And they, you know, they caught on. I let her use it one time. And I'm like, oh, no, this is going to get ugly. Ooh. I think it's closer I get to you or something. I don't know. OK. And then lastly, Chance the Rapper, right? So you guys have seen and all the fluctuation or the disruption in the music industry where you don't have to be found through a production house or a studio, right? They've changed the value chain on how you identify new talent. And Chance the Rapper is another example of that, right? He started out in the music industry, and he's actually moved into adjacent areas as a result of his distribution breadth now. So, all right. So, we just gave you a lot there. This is my slide, right? Yeah. OK. So technology technology alone is not the answer, right? If you really listen closely to the examples that we gave you, technology is an enablement. It's important. It's critically fundamental to this revolution that we're going through and the disruptions that's happening. You can't do it without technologists, right? But this is where the women's stuff come in, okay? There needs to be a balance, right? So, you know, have you guys ever heard of the expression, the nail and the hammer, right? If you ask a hammer any kind of solution, it's always going to assume that you bang the nail or whatever. If you ask a cardiologist, right, or a surgeon, you know, should I get an operation? Hell yeah, you should get an operation, right? Like it's that kind of notion. So as technologists, and this is, again, where we as women, I think we have a big opportunity at hand because we know that technology alone is not the answer. The solutions aren't always in the technology. It is enabled by the technology, but there needs to be a balance. So, and we think women are uniquely positioned and equipped to excel in this environment. So what do we mean by that? So if you think about what women bring, and these, again, I'm going to go into a little bit of stereotypes here, but I think inherently we all know that there's some truth in it. There's both the good stereotypes and the bad stereotypes, right? There's books written about it. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's kind of real. So let's go through some of these things. And again, I don't think anything will be of surprise to you, but I think it's important for us to remind ourselves, what do we bring to the table, we as women? And also, with that, what are the things that we bring unconsciously that we need to check every now and then? So, first one, emotional intelligence, right? It is the competitive advantage. When you interview or when you hear interviews about women leaders and their ability to calmly assess the situation, to really have empathy with the employees that they're talking to, those are the leaders that you want to follow. I would argue generally, you know, good leaders, if you look at the traits of good leaders, one of the biggest traits of a leader that people want to follow as opposed to a manager is this whole notion of EQ or emotional intelligence. Women generally have that, right? There's a stat in here that I wanted to share with you guys. Women are 86% more likely than men to use their EQ and to rely on their EQ. When they talk about their success, they actually say, part of my success is because I can assess the situation, that I have a high EQ, right? So versus men, 45% of the time. So it's a stark difference, okay? Other things, women entrepreneurs experience higher well-being. There's a video that we're going to show. I won't give it away now, but generally speaking, women entrepreneurs tend to be more successful than men entrepreneurs. These are just the stats, okay? But they have a higher well-being also to top it off, right? So we would attribute this to women generally have they are propelled by their purpose. So it's not just for their well-being and caring for their families and having a career, but generally if they're out in the workforce and they want to be an entrepreneur, they're doing it because they're passionate about something and they're not afraid to show it, okay? How many of you are moms out there? Okay, there's a lot. And those that aren't, it's okay too. I would still venture to bet that you have this attribute because I think it's innate. My husband says it all the time. I think he's using it as an excuse to get out of stuff, but you know, women are more adept at multitasking. You know, the whole notion of, okay, got to make dinner while I'm on a conference call, and then I got to make sure that this person's driving somewhere else, right? Being driven somewhere else. All these things happen. My husband goes, oh, no. Hold on. What do you want me to do? 1, 2, 3, right? And again, these are broad generalizations, but one of the key successes, I think, is that this whole notion of being able to assess the situation, multitask, balance it, you know, juggle a lot of things. Last one, or these last two ones, are that women are natural collaborators, and they often will mentor and share. So again, if you generalize, women tend to, this is one of the negative biases about women, right? Have you guys heard the saying that when asked in a group of, you know, a diverse audience, how many men or how many people would think they're qualified for a job or have taken jobs or applied for jobs that they're not qualified for, but sit there and say, I'll figure it out? Compare that with women who sit there and say, wait a minute, I've never done this work. I'm not qualified for that job. I've not checked this 10 boxes, right? So there's this bias that women have that they need to do it before they're qualified.
I have an example of that too. In a meeting, it was with a breastfeeding baby formula. And in the meeting, they asked, so how many of you consider yourselves experts in breastfeeding? And there was probably an equal number of men and women in this group. 2 of the men raised their hands. None of the women raised their hands. And come to find out, the 2 men thought they were experts because their wives had breastfed a decade or so before. Meantime, there's several women in that group that are actually breastfeeding now that don't consider themselves experts. So think about that shift. It goes across the board.
So these are the biases or unconscious biases that we have about ourselves. Just keep that in mind as we go through some of these slides, right? I think that's a good one. Oh my gosh. So women are uniquely qualified, okay? We'd like to venture that, put that out there for you. You are all qualified, more than you know, to actually make a difference in the stats, actually help women propel in their careers in technology. And it doesn't have to be technology roles per se. So let me give you another example. You guys might have, in terms of trends in roles that are out there right now, how many of you guys have been hearing more and more about product managers out there? Okay, so a good amount, right? Every few weeks now, I feel like there's an article about the need for more product managers and, you know, distinct and different. I'm always telling my clients, they're not project managers. There's a difference between product managers and project managers. And when you break it down to these distinct characteristics of what makes a good product manager, you'll see that women are actually uniquely qualified, right? A good product manager balances the technical aspect, can run the numbers, can understand from a technical blueprint what it should look like, but they also understand the value of design. Again, in Stitch Fix, right? The simplicity and the elegance of the site is what makes users adopt it. But the power that runs behind it is all in the technical engine that drives it, right? So it's understanding that balance is key. I don't know if any of you guys are working in ERP systems, right? We're starting to see more and more clients ask us to say, we just spent $30 million on this new procurement system, and nobody knows how to use it. And if you look at these sites, you know, these screens, it's not user-friendly, right? So women generally understand the balance between the technical background and the elegant simplicity that's driven by design. The other thing about product managers is this whole notion of communication, right? Women generally are better communicators when they're confident, okay? All of us have to be more confident. When you're confident, you bring out those points. You bring up a more balanced point of view. You don't feel like most women aren't jamming a point of view down someone's backs, all right, or throats. Again, it's the same notion that we tend to be more level and balanced than men. And so, you know, as communicators, as facilitators, we're more effective in these product management roles. So you can see some of those things. You know, we said communications is 40%, design, engineering, business acumen. Left brain, right brain, jeans, suits, you can name your analogy, but that's what we're talking about here. And in real life examples, we would also want to share with you 3 examples of women that we think are, you know, these are Fortune 50 women in technology. So you want to tell a little bit about these guys, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think our big point with this, with the 3 of them, is if you look at them, their backgrounds, you think that they're in tech. I mean, Meg Whitman, other than Hewlett-Packard, she was the CEO of eBay. Completely revolutionized the way we think about buying online. eBay came before doing auctions, before anybody else was looking at it this way, and choosing your price and all these other things. All 3 of them, though, leading major tech companies, none of them have a tech background. I mean, one was a liberal arts major, one has a lawyer, a JD, and the other, I think, was in financial services or something like that.
iBanker.
So they're taking different thinking. It's the different thinking that they bring to how you look at tech, and tech as an organization, and what you can do with it. And that's what actually helped them create businesses that were different than everything else we saw. So it's this diversity of thinking that is critical to success. And it's not new. I mean, look at, these women have been around for decades. This is not new. But now we're suddenly hearing a lot about it. And the reason we're hearing a lot about it now is because businesses are hurting. The big businesses are in really tough shape and trying to figure out how do they turn things around? How do they innovate? How do they reach consumers? How do they do things differently? And in order to do that, they need to bring in diversity of thinking. So one of the things we're seeing is a lot of them trying to bring in these different people, because the numbers prove it out. I mean, research and study after study prove the more women you have in the organization, the more you have in leadership, the more you have in boards, the more money you make. And what speaks to businesses but making money? So they're paying attention to this. So they go, how can we bring in these people? But we also have to think about the type of people you're bringing in and what you allow them to do. So the fact is, the changes we've seen in the last decade, the changes we've seen in how we live, how we shop, our expectations, how we can pull up an app and get from A to B, and for $5, I can get down to the short north. I mean, everything has changed in how we live, but it's about to go faster. Things are about to accelerate. The World Economic Forum said last year that we are on the brink of a revolution. Everything about how we live, how we play, how we shop, how we transport, how we work, all these things are about to change. The investment in new technologies and unlocking human potential has never been greater. It's blowing away anything that we've seen from the past. And we have a group of people that are already there. I mean, this is where we get to start talking about my people. So,
my people.
These are the Gen Zs. These are the 12 to 21-year-olds that are coming up behind millennials right now, that are radically different than millennials, or in fact, any generation we've ever seen before. Different set of expectations, beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. They're already there. So when we talk about diversity and bringing in different thinking and equality and anything is possible world, this is already the way that they think. So understanding who they are and anticipating how they can help us change the world is key to unlocking the potential for all of us. Now, understanding who they are requires a little bit of understanding their background. See, generations are born from change. It's not a specific number of years. It's not every 10 years or every 15 years we change. It's actually the changes that happen within society that create different generations. And for this group, they've seen more change in their brief lifetimes than any generation ever before had experienced. Let's look at this just a second. Beyond the technology, just their world. So for them, they've never known a time, most of them can't remember a time, when we didn't have an African-American president or a female wasn't a serious contender. until recently. And after this last election, I had a 5-year-old little boy ask me if we've ever had a white man president before. This is how their minds work. They think differently. But they also have been born into the turbulent time. You know, they've never known a time of ease and peace. I mean, think about this. The oldest of them were in kindergarten when 9/11 happened. So for them, the threat of war, the threat of terrorism has always been part of their daily life. Constant state of war. I remember I was in college when we declared Desert Storm. And I remember sitting there, I heard about it on the way to a night class. I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, I can't believe the US is at war. I never in my life thought I would see that. I mean, can you imagine having that mindset now? They've been raised constantly looking at it, and this is a global issue. This isn't just in the US. Global recession. So right now, we see the stock market continuously going up. We see all these great things, but yet among them, they're still hoarding. They're still cautious. They don't believe it because they've never known a time of prosperity. So they're more similar to the children of the Great Depression, where as they age, they still didn't want credit cards. They still didn't want debt. They were always careful. This is the type of mentality we're seeing with them when it comes to financial. And school violence. So the oldest of them were 2 when Columbine happened. So for them, school has never been a safety zone. It's always been a place of lockdown drills and metal detectors. So they practice on a regular basis. You know, I grew up in the Midwest too, and we practiced tornado drills, quarterly, whatever it was. They practice on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly, what they will do if somebody storms their school with guns. What's their immediate reaction? How do you handle that? What happens if somebody turns on you and something happens in your school? This is part of their daily life. So much so that 43% of 7 to 13-year-olds say that school violence will be the influencer of their generation, have the greatest impact on their generation, specifically bigger than having an African-American president or the advent of social media.
Hey, Marcie, what's the ages for
12 to
Gen Z?
21.
Okay.
So this is a different generation, and what influences them is also different. Who influences them?
Yeah, so, all right. Which one could, when we asked a group of Gen Zers, if you ask them, which one could you not live without, right? You see them on their devices all the time. They're tweeting, they're texting, they're Snapchatting. Any guesses out there? What do you think they can't live without, their application? I hear Snapchat, YouTube, Spotify. Okay, YouTube. 50% said they can't live without their YouTube. You got it. They spend an average of 3 hours a day on YouTube. So I'll give you an example of something interesting. What do they do on YouTube? I was fascinated by this, right? I have a 12-year-old son, and I always ask him, I'm like, where are you? And I'm always worried, what are you finding on YouTube, right? God forbid, I don't know. You can't, there's not enough filters out there to figure out what he's finding. And literally, you know how Rubik's Cube? He went through this age. This is back a few years back when he was in 4th grade. All of a sudden, Rubik's Cube became the in thing. This is before the spinners. I saw somebody giving away spinners out there. So Rubik's Cubes were the thing, and he was like, I have to have a Rubik's Cube. I'm like, fine. Buy him a Rubik's Cube, and the next thing I know, I see him doing it. I'm like, how'd you do this? He goes, I figured it out. I said, but how did you figure it out? He goes, I went on YouTube. Okay? So they don't know this notion of how, I don't know how to do something because YouTube tells them. There's somebody that's done something, whether it be flipping bottles, any kind of latest thing going on right now, they've learned and figured it out. My daughter says the same thing. When she wants to cook, she learns and figures it out, right? All on YouTube. Contrast that with Facebook, by the way. Sorry. Facebook, okay, so I don't know, again, I'll share another generational thing. Our generation, we're always on Facebook. That's our thing, right? We have community pages and so on and so forth. My kids are like, why? Why are you on Facebook? Why? What's the value of it? Okay, if I want to get babysitting jobs, I better be on Facebook. That's the only thing.
Or news from their school.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So what is it about these Gen Zs in contrast to millennials? One of the big observations that Marcie's research has shown us is that Gen Zers believe in imperfection. They embrace it. They're authentic, right? You can see it in terms of how they communicate on social media. And Gen Zs, right, they'll use Snapchats. They'll make these goofy faces I still don't get, right? My daughter's doing something. Goofy faces like that. That's what they believe in. Versus millennials on Instagram, they're showing how cool they are. You know, Facebook, it's always the perfect life, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, and it's, if you look at the way they've been raised, you know, they look at the society they grew up in, I mean, the fake stuff really turns them off. You know, trying to pretend that life's perfect, that it looks great, that, you know, everything's a beach party, that, you know, this woman actually took the picture and, you know, this is the selfie on her first take. I guarantee there's 25 pictures that she had to take to get to this point. To them, that's just a huge turnoff because they really gravitate toward people and brands that they feel get the gritty nature of their contemporary lives. And Snapchat is it. I mean, just to drill that home, Snapchat has 4 times the number of teenagers of this group users, even though they're only half the size. This is where they're gravitating and where they're at. So another example of their comparison, if you look at US and the UK, Malala. You all know who Malala is? They certainly do. And when asked in the UK and US, who do you respect? It was Malala that came up, not Beyonce. You know, not none of these other people. Gen Z focuses on these people, the people who are doing things, who are making changes, who are going out and risking things in the world. Financially, they're careful, but everything else they're willing to risk to move things forward. They feel like they need to be part of that answer. Another way that we're seeing differences in them from past generations is in gender, which I think is so important for all of us to understand. So less than half of Gen Z see themselves as even being completely heterosexual. Compare that to where millennials are. For them, gender is fluid. It's agnostic. It's something, a personal choice. So whether it's sexual orientation or their own gender identity, they feel like they have a choice in it and they can do what they want. So think about how different they're going to view things when they get into the workforce. And they see male, female. I mean, to them, this is going to be asinine, the way that we look at the world and what we do, because this is just not the way that they think about it. Even when you look at how they shop, the majority prefer unisex stores, and less than half of them prefer gender-specific apparel. I mean, they don't look at the world this way. But what's even more interesting, I think, or interesting addition, is what they share. So I think about when I was that age and different things people are going through, they didn't share information. They openly share who's gay, who's straight, who's bi, who's thinking about it, who likes who. It's just normal. It's just normal, which is fantastic. But again, what's it going to be like when they enter our world and they see archaic? It's changing how they view themselves and what's important. So 68% of females say they'd rather be strong than skinny. It's more important to be strong, and this is strong of mind and strong of body. And they're changing stereotypes. So I was telling a friend about this recently, and afterward he's like, oh my God, I got to show you a picture of my granddaughter. So he shows me a picture of his granddaughter, tells me about how she is on the varsity boys football team. She's also on the varsity boys wrestling team, and she's on the boys, of course, because there's not a girls. But then he said last year she was pulled off the field from one of the football games. She was pulled off the field to be put on the homecoming court. So it's not something that's ostracized or weird. It's something that they actually hold out. And these are, you know, she was judged based on who she was, not on doing these other things. So why are they so different? The majority of them, the vast majority, say that it's technology, it's access. The internet is their eyes and ears onto the world. And it's teaching them how they can change the world, how they can have different views. Their community is a community of people who see things the same way, not the people who just live around them. So they're not limited to that like the way past generations have been. But they're also not naive. They get that they see things differently. More than half, just more than half, think workplace equality has been achieved, which I, of course, think is a little stretched. But at least they don't all think it's going to be a perfect piece of cake. They know it's going to be tough and challenging. The majority, 87%, think racial discrimination still exists. And it's probably because the majority of them are actually racially diverse. You know, they've probably experienced it in their own or have seen their friends experience it. And they know, 3/4 of them know that they see things different than their parents' generation did. They know they have different views. So they've gone through early loss of innocence with the things that they've experienced. But we're producing a generation of ambitious realists. They're pragmatic. They want to go out and understand what's happening. They want to understand it so that they can change it rather than putting their heads under the, putting their heads in the sand. Out of this, we're getting a generation very different than what we've had in the past. We have a generation of savers. 63% of them say if they have extra money, they're going to save it rather than spend it. 80% of them are finding ways to make money, to have jobs. Last year was the first time since 2008 that the number of teens in food service went up over the summer. We're seeing more of them going out and trying to find ways to work and do other things. Saving, 12% of them are saving for retirement. Now, 41% of millennials haven't even started yet. A little bit of a shift there. 80% of them, this is specifically high school students, say that they're more driven than their peers. They want to succeed. They're willing to do what they need to succeed. And if you think about past generations and what we saw with millennials, that was more about teamwork, working together, everybody getting the blue ribbon, everyone getting a trophy. They shun the blue ribbon and trophy for everyone. They want to know that they've earned it. And the vast majority say they're uber productive. It's more important to do things that are going to get them ahead, that are going to get them where they want to get in their careers, in their lives, into the right colleges. They're calculating and where they're going. So out of this, at the same time we're seeing a correlation in the reduction in the number of teenage pregnancies. It's at an all-time low. Teenage smoking, teenage binge drinking, all of these are at an all-time low. We're raising a generation of doers, hackers, and problem solvers. They're going out and they're taking care of addressing the problems that need to be solved and tackling the issues that need to be addressed. So they're just as purposeful or just as passionate as millennials. Very passionate in what they're doing as we're millennials. But we're seeing more independence of thinking, of behaviors, of values. They're making judgments based on their own beliefs, not necessarily of those around them. And they're more purposeful in their actions. They're thinking about the steps that they take today and where it's going to get them tomorrow and how they're going to get ahead. So to think about why they're so different than past generations, let's just look at millennials a little bit, the generation just before them. So millennials can still remember using a phone or a dial-up or trying to program a VCR. For them, the big innovation in maps was going from triptychs to MapQuest. I mean, I remember just 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I worked on the project for AAA that got them to the electronic version versus the paper version. That's how fast things have gone. Think about Gen Z today, what it takes. They don't need to ask anybody for anything. So the worldview has changed. So today's 25 to 34-year-olds were 20 when they got their first smartphone. So they had already gotten through high school. They had already probably started college or gotten into the workforce by the time they had access to this type of information. The 18 to 24-year-olds were 16, so at least they were in high school. But the 13 to 17-year-olds, the core group of this generation, they were 12 when they got their first smartphone. So they were just going into or pre-puberty. They got to go through all of adolescence. They're going to go through their first dates, their first jobs, their first everything with access to the world in their hands. And this technology's changed them, how they think, their independence, their access to information, but it hasn't just changed them. This technology, the biggest social change this technology has had is what it's done to us. As parents, as educators, as society. It's how we've reacted to the technology that has had the biggest shift and has changed them and shaped who they are. So Gen Z's parents never really had the chance to protect them from all this technology. Millennials' parents could still, unplug the TV, turn off the computer that was still in the family room where we could watch everything that they were doing. They're holding it in their hands. They're aware of everything that's going on. We cannot protect them. Instead, we're teaching them. We're having discussions with them about what they have to be aware of, what they have to do, how they have to prepare for college, how they don't want to end up in massive debt, not being able to get jobs. Out of this, we have a more independent generation. They're more independent in their approach, what they're thinking about, and their actions, and they expect to, to have a sense of self-responsibility and accountability. Out of this, we've gone from the infamous helicopter parents to the stealth bomber parents. So it's not that we're watching or not watching. So we can actually track. I can get my phone right now and tell you exactly where my daughter is, right? As long as she's got her phone on her, I can track her. So we're watching. So what we do is watch, observe, and when we see things going awry, zoom in, drop a few bombs, course correct, and zoom back out. So every generation is told, you can do anything. You can be whatever you want to be. But this is the first generation that's had the hands-on tools to see how it's possible and to believe it. So when they hear the you can do anything speech, they take it quite literally. They're coding, they're hacking, they're digging into the problems. They're making things happen. They know how, they have the ability. So this isn't just a US mentality either. This is a global mentality. This is happening around the world. So understanding who they are and how we can use them to help the rest of us move the tide is critical.
All right, so what does this all mean for all of us here in the room? What tidbits of information should you be taking away? We just walked through the stats of women in technology. We went through why technology is fueling all of this change and is the underlying thing that we should all embrace. We know that industries and companies, all sizes and makes, won't survive without adopting technology and leveraging it. And we also knew that, or talked about that women are uniquely equipped, right, to bring about that change and where technology is going to be leveraged. Okay.
And we know this next group is ready to do it.
They're ahead of us, right? Everything that you should have gotten from Marcie is that they're already there. They don't see this. So the first thing we would venture to suggest is that we need to be more transparent. We need to talk about things out and in the open. This generation that's coming next, the Gen Zers, they're used to sharing everything. Like we talked about, they're sharing their lives over Instagram. They're sharing their likes, dislikes, all the good and the bad and the ugly. Unlike our generation on Facebook, if you guys have those friends that always paint the perfect life, you just sort of sit there going, totally different. This is a generation that appreciates and expects transparency.
So when we think about what transparency means, here's one example. So this is Whole Foods, which there's a lot of different types of transparency, and Whole Foods offers a lot of it, whether it's food and where the food comes from and everything else. But where I think it's most fascinating is what's going on in the back of house. So Whole Foods, since shortly after John Mackey created the company, he had a policy of open transparency about salaries. So everybody in the entire company can go into a database and see how much everybody else makes, from the bagger all the way up to the CEO, and see what they've gotten on an increase, understand what their performance review was and what that meant. And John Mackey's view was if everyone knows what everyone's making, they'll understand what we value. They'll understand what's important to us, what we reward, and what they need to do. And the reason we bring this up as a great example of transparency, if you think about this generation, I talked about how they share everything. They're going to share this stuff. So we're already seeing in our company, the millennials, the younger millennials share more of the information, but they're sharing it with different sources so it can be aggregated. This generation is going to share it directly. And think about that. What is that going to mean for equality and parity? So all the companies that are talking about what they do and talking about equality, the numbers are going to be out in the public. It's going to happen. This generation will not accept having that information hidden. To them, if it's hidden, if you're not telling me something, it's because you got something to hide. This is going to make a major shift. So if we think about that and them coming up and anticipating it, I think within our own organizations, we got to start thinking about what that means now. Because they're going to look back and see what we've done in the past, and they're going to judge us by that. And if you want to get the best people and get the greatest diversity, companies need to be thinking about now what the implications are going to be. Another one is authenticity. So we talked about the importance for them of being authentic, being real. whether it's good or bad, they want to know that they're getting the real deal in the real person. And we think about how important that is in organizations. It's not just important to us as women, but it's important for the organizations. Because if we hire in people that look different, or we have the female quota or whatever it is, and they come in and they're forced to act and assimilate, you kind of lost the whole value. I mean, as Sally Krawcheck said, the value of diversity is diversity. You gotta let women be women and let people be themselves. If we're gonna bring them in, we gotta let them be themselves to get the true value out of it. So we have a video, which I'm hoping works, that I think brings home a lot of these points and the importance of letting people bring their best selves to work.
Let's see if it goes. Can you hit play?
Yeah. I should have been able to do it.
There we go.
Here. Okay.
Oh.
There you go.
I mean, I don't want to start gender warfare because, frankly,
sorry.
I'd give money to a goat if I get a return. But the truth is, if you look at my portfolio over 9 years, and that's a long time in small private companies as a result of Shark Tank and all the auxiliary companies I get to see because of the Shark Tank platform, not some of my returns, all of my returns have come from the ones run by women or owned by women. And I speculate it's for 2 reasons. Number one is they're extremely strong at time management skills. That old adage, if you want something done, give it to a busy mother, turns out to be true in companies that are generally doing, in my case, between 5 and 500 million in sales. So small numbers, the average size is 20 employees. They're extremely strong at allocating the time skills of those people. But secondly, and this is the most fascinating one to me, when I look at the goals that are met on a quarterly basis, particularly in revenue on the companies run by women, they achieve those goals 90% of the time versus 65% of the time on the ones that I own run by men. And we've basically got about 44 companies in this portfolio, and a long period of time, well over 7 years. So by setting goals that are achievable, here's my theory, you get less staff turnover, morale stays higher, and when you're a company with only 15 or 20 people and you lose the head salesperson or the person responsible for logistics, it's extremely disruptive. And perhaps that's why these women-led companies are doing a better job, setting goals that are achievable and allocating time skills or time management in a much more effective way. And as a result now, generally in new deals, I tell the guys that are running O'Leary Ventures, skew towards the women-led deals. We're just making better money. I'm just being pragmatic. Yeah. Higher returns. That's why I invest in the first place.
And it's been true.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CM.
So think about that. If we bring people in and we're checking the box because we got a woman, but we don't let them do things differently, use the intuitive understanding of how to manage time, of how to make people happy, the pragmatic nature, which is often put on the other side of being too pragmatic and not taking chances. But think about how we can use these things within it and allow people to be themselves and the value of that.
All right, next one. Check your biases. Your biases, right? So I shared with you some biases that we all naturally have, whether it be stereotypical or whether it be our notion of what women in technology are. We had one consultant that was working with us, and we were thinking through some of these things. She sat next to a gentleman on a plane, and he was having some trouble with his laptop, and she provided advice. And this is just a general explanation of, he says, oh, you must be in technology. She goes, no, I'm a consultant, right? And he said, but how do you know so much? And they started getting into the discussion. And he goes, just because you don't have a traditional technology role doesn't mean you're not a powerful woman in technology. So check your own biases, right? Check your own, make sure that you are not falling into the traps, both good and bad, about how you view women in technology and what the roles of women in technology are.
So we've looked at the idea of authenticity, of transparency, of checking the bias, the importance of having women in tech, what the idea of tech is, redefining tech, the critical aspects of it to the business, and looking at this next generation that's coming up behind us, or coming up now. What I now invite all of you to do is think about some of these things. Think about how you can potentially use some of these ideas within your organizations or with the people you're working with or yourself to think about how we can bring more transparency, how we can be more authentic selves and allow others to be it too, and the benefits that it comes back to the organization. I think that helps all of us check what the biases are, not just what's being done to us, but what we might be, how we might be limiting ourselves through these biases. With that, we thank you and invite you to all ride the wave of this next generation because it can take us to great places.